if we have congruent triangles, we're going to write some congruency statements. And when we write congruency statements, we use, so we're going to sketch these two triangles. This is going to be A, B, and C. And we'll call this D. Now, the order that these triangles are written in, or the name of this angle is written in, is very important because it tells us the congruent parts. For example, if we're looking at triangle ABC, that means that A is congruent to angle D. So I'm going to put a little arc here showing that they are congruent. And then D, which is the second angle we go through when we're naming it, is going to be congruent to angle E. So we already used one arc, so for these two, I'm going to show that they're congruent using two arcs. And then angle C is going to be congruent to angle F. So since we already used the 2, we're going to use 3 for this one. And the same happens when we're talking about the segment. For example, if I look at segment AB, which is this segment right here, it's going to be congruent to segment DE, which is this segment right here. So I'm going to put a tick mark to show they're congruent. Then if we look at the next 2 points, from B to C, segment BC, that's going to be congruent to segment EF. So EF. So I'm going to use 2 tick marks on this one to show their congruence. What I also want you to notice is that this segment is connecting E and F. E has the same number of arcs as B, and F has the same number of arcs as C. So it's like a matching game. And then finally, we go AC. AC is congruent to DF. So we're going to use 3 tick marks to show they're congruent. So you can tell a lot by the way 2 triangles are shown in their congruency statement. So that brings us to Cpctc. So corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. Any questions so far? All right, so we're going to look at this congruency statement, and just based off of the names of those triangles, we're going to identify the congruent parts. So if we start with angle J, what would angle J be congruent to? Close your computer, please, Eva. Thank you. Because it's first in the name JKL, we want to look at the first angle in the second triangle, which is angle P. And now we do angle K. Angle K is congruent to what angle? Q. Perfect. And then finally, we look at angle L. And angle L is congruent to angle R. And those are my angles. Now let's look at the congruency statements for my segments. So let's start with segment JK. What is segment JK congruent to? It's just like the angles. Segment PQ, right? The first 2. If these two are the first 2, then these two are the first 2. PQ. And then we have segment KL. And what is segment KL congruent to? QR, perfect. Segment QR. And then what's my last segment? What is it? EG? You're on the wrong one, right? On the other one, sweetheart. We're on the first one. PR, right? We do the first and the last one. So we do the first 2, the last 2, and then we'll do the first with the last. So we have segment PR. Yes, PR is congruent to what segment? JL. Segment JL. Any questions? All right, so there are other ways to name this triangle. Now, if I were to name this triangle, do an alternate name, for this triangle, and let's say I name it triangle KLJ. What would triangle KLJ be congruent to? Close it, please. All the way. You don't need it. Thank you. QRP. Good. QRP. Notice how it's still in the same order, KLJ arcs, to show that they're congruent. Then we've got angle P. We already used one arc, so we're going to use two arcs for angle P, congruent to angle Y. And then angle M, congruent to angle. And let's put our tick marks on our segments. We've got KP is congruent to AY. PM is congruent to YC. And KM is congruent to CA. Segment KM is congruent to segment AC. Then we've got CY is congruent to MP, segment MP, go back, YA, sorry, oh my goodness, Miss Silva, KM and then P. So we look at the middle one has two arcs, the middle one has, three arcs, the middle one has three arcs. We started with M, then P, then K. So what's another way to name this triangle using that same order? What matches with M? Right, CYA, triangle CYA. And then lastly, we have triangle YAC. What can we name this triangle? Or what order should it be in? Which angle is congruent to angle Y? P. And then angle A is K. And then C is M, their triangle. Good. Do you see how it's congruent to angle B? So we're going to write down our little marks first before we actually try to start solving it. Then we're going to look at angle T. What is angle T going to be congruent to? Angle F. And then angle N is congruent to what? I'm sorry, angle W is congruent to what angle? And mark that one with a tick mark to show that they're congruent. Let's go to the next two. TW, what is TW going to be congruent to? TW is congruent to what segment? FN. So we're going to use two tick marks here to show that those two are congruent. And then lastly, we have SW with 3. So I'm going to put it with BN also because those two segments are congruent. So now that we have that, now we're going to find the missing measures. So for A, we're going to look for the measurement of BN. Now, if you look at BN, we don't have that measurement anymore. We're now using equal sign because now we're looking at actual numbers. This triangle, on the other triangle, this one has 2 tick marks. So what's my measurement? 14 centimeters. Let's look at letter C. Letter C is the measurement of BF. We have this measurement, BF, and that one is congruent to the one that has that 1 tick mark, also TS. So what's that measurement? 17. Perfect. And now we're going to look at the angle measures. So the measurement of angle W. What would be the measurement of angle W? What is angle W congruent to? Right, angle N, which is 82 degrees. Thank you, Samaya. Then we go letter E is going to be the measurement of angle B. And what is the measurement of angle, what is congruent to angle B? Angle S. And angle S is equal to 67 degrees. And now we have the measurement of angle F. Angle F is congruent to angle T, but do we have angle T? No. How can we find angle T? What can we do?
All triangles in equality, so
Perfect. So we're going to add these two angles. So 67 plus 82. And that gives us 21 degrees. So angle F will be 21 degrees. Phones away, please. All right, let's go ahead and go to the last example. Or second to last example. Now we're bringing some algebra into it. So go ahead and copy these problems down. And we're going to be looking for angle X, the value of X, the value of Y, and the value of Z. All right, so first let's look at angle P. And what is angle P congruent to? Angle C. Good. And the next one, we've got angle H is congruent to angle N. And then we have angle S congruent to angle F. All right, so let's first solve for one of the variables. Solve for X. Now, if we look at our angle measures, the angle measure that has X is angle H. So we're going to say that the angle H is congruent to what angle? We're just looking at the names of the angles right now. Angle N. Notice how I'm using the congruency symbol. And now that we know that those two are congruent, now let's put the angle measure. Angle H is 6x minus 29 equals, now that we're using numbers, we're going to use equals, and angle N is equal to 115 degrees. Phone away, please. So let's go ahead and solve for X. We're going to add 29 to both sides, 144, and then divide it by 6. And we get X is equal to 24. Am I right? I'm not. Yeah. 144 divided by 6. Yeah, 24. All right. Now let's solve for y. Let's look for the statement that says y, our expression. 3y minus 1, that's angle F. So let's go ahead and put the measure of angle F is congruent to what angle measure? Angle S. Angle F is 3y minus 1. Angle S, do we know what the angle measure is? What can we do to find it? How can we find that missing angle measure? We know this one's 115. How do we find angle S? We're going to add, I'm going to put a little bubble over here, where we add 115 plus 36, and that gives us 151 degrees, and then we're going to subtract it from 180. Perfect. Thank you, Samaya. And we get 29. Yep. So then angle S is 29 degrees. All right, and now we're going to solve for y. Divide by 3, and we get y is equal to 10. All right, we got one more. Now we're going to solve for z. Let's look for the expression that has z on it, which is angle C. So we've got angle C is congruent to what angle? 36, which is angle P, right? So we're going to say angle P first, and now we're going to say angle C is equal to 4z minus 32. And angle P was what degree measure? 36. And now we have our equation to solve for z. So let's solve for z, d8, thank you. And we get z is equal to 17, right? Help me with my math.